Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wintergreen Studios' virtual land art BioBlitz. You have arrived at the session titled Reptiles and Amphibians of Ontario. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Jess Pilo. I'm the project coordinator at Wintergreen Studios, and I am your video host for our session today. And now I am very happy to introduce our speaker, Kenny Ruelland of Reptile and Amphibian Advocacy. So Kenny Ruelland is a naturalist, a conservationist, and photographer. And in 2015, he realized that reptile and amphibian conservation is what he wanted to dedicate his life to, and so began Reptile and Amphibian Advocacy. This passion has driven him across Ontario, observing and photographing native reptiles and amphibians, some of them being very elusive and hard to find. And on his website, he's found 41 out of 48 so far. But that number might be out of date, so we will leave that up to Kenny to share with you. So Kenny, welcome to our virtual BioBlitz.
All right, so my name is Kenny Ruelland. I have been at every Wintergreen BioBlitz other than, I believe, the second annual BioBlitz that you guys did. They've been nice enough to let me join and be their reptile and amphibian expert. They're nice enough to consider me such. So what myself and my friend Eric Woodley, he has helped me a lot over the past few years at this BioBlitz. We go and we do usually a short presentation. We tell everyone about our local reptiles and amphibians, why we need to help them, how we can help them. And then usually we also do a guided hike on the property. So if any of you have ever been to Wintergreen Studios, you will know that it is an absolutely gorgeous property. I go there as much as I can. I was actually just there yesterday looking for some reptiles and amphibians. We had a pretty good day. We saw some awesome species, but I'll kind of save that for the end when I get more into Wintergreen Studios itself. So the project I run, Reptile and Amphibian Advocacy, it started in 2015 as a mostly outreach education project. So our goal was to educate the public on our native reptiles and amphibians and why we need to save them. So, you know, a lot of people, when they think about species that are disappearing, you know, they think about the big charismatic megafauna like lions and tigers and elephants and stuff like that. But people don't realize that we have native species disappearing right here in our own backyards. So maybe what I'll do, it'll show you my slideshow here that I was hoping to present for you guys on the laptop. Basically, we have 4 species that have been extirpated from Ontario. So that is the timber rattlesnake. That is also the cricket frog, the spring salamander. So these species have been extirpated from the province due to mostly human persecution, like the snake species, such as the timber rattlesnake. So unfortunately, many people, they're not fond of our native snake species. Now, that's due to a lot of the time, people when they're growing up, you know, you hear that snakes are bad and they're out to attack people and chase people down. Now, if you have any experience with snakes in the wild, you know this is not true. Again, we are out here trying to research these species and observe them, and they're not coming up to us showing themselves to us. You know, we have to put in work to see these species. So I'm just going to bring up my slideshow here that I was hoping to show you guys. So we have the timber rattlesnake, the eastern tiger salamander, and the Blanchard's cricket frog, and the spring salamander, which are all unfortunately extirpated in the province right now. The timber rattlesnake, the last observation in the province was actually 1941, and that was in the Niagara Escarpment. So those are sadly killed off just to humans not understanding them, being afraid. And that's kind of what we're out here trying to stop, is this irrational fear of not just snakes, but many reptiles and amphibians in Ontario. Again, some people, they even don't like salamanders, frogs, turtles. The turtle thing, I can't really understand. The turtles are pretty cute. They don't harm anyone. Snapping turtles are a big one. You always hear stories about, you know, snapping turtles can take your fingers off, and, you know, you hear horror stories about swimmers and snapping turtles, which is usually all folklore. So a lot of people don't realize that 44% of our amphibian species and subspecies, and 65% of them are listed as endangered, threatened, or special concern by CASUIC. So there's different levels of protection for the reptiles and amphibians in Ontario. So the lowest level of this protection is special concern. So species like the painted turtle, they recently just got listed as special concern federally. Species like our milk snakes, what else do we have as special concern? Our map turtles, they are also listed as special concern. So that is the lowest level of protection that they can have. So that's basically protection for individuals. So next we have threatened. Now, when a species is threatened, that's when they kind of have some weight in their name. So what this means is if you find a Blandings turtle, for example, and you submit that observation to NHIC, that can actually instantly create habitat protection in that area. So you'll see fencing put up along Highway 15 and other local highways. And these fences are usually put in place because there's Blandings turtles observed in that area. And that's the only species that gets this type of protections really put in place. So we have 52 species of extant reptiles and amphibians in Ontario. So what that means is they're still living in the province. And as I said, we have 4 extirpated species, and that is these guys over here: the spring salamander, the Blanchard's cricket frog, timber rattlesnake, and tiger salamander. So you may see the word up here, herpetiles. So that is just a collective term for all reptiles and amphibians. So herpetology is the study of reptiles and amphibians. And that term comes from the Latin word herp, which means to to creep or crawl. So just like birders go birding, when they go out and observe birds and photograph birds, we go out and we photograph reptiles and amphibians and observe them, and that's called herping. And when you're a young kid and you tell people you're going herping, sometimes you can get some crass looks. So what I'm going to do now is go over our local species that we have in the area. So this presentation was actually made for Little Cat Creek here in Kingston, where I live. So it was focused on just species we have right here in Kingston. Now I fixed it up a little bit. So up here, I'm not sure if you guys can read it. The highlighted species in green are local species. And if you see ones in yellow, it means they're transient or they're kind of on the outskirts of the area. So up at Wintergreen, we have observed an insane amount of reptiles and amphibians, almost every species that you could observe in Eastern Ontario. And we'll go through those right now. Unfortunately, this year we can't be there actually observing them on the property, but hopefully next year, anyone that is participating now that has not been on the property can come join us. So up here we have the Blandings turtle. So I was just speaking about them. Now, we actually have yet to observe one on the property, but you can pretty much just know they're there. You know, they're all over that Frontenac area. We actually, unfortunately, got one that was hit on the road as we were leaving Wintergreen the other day. That was really upsetting. But we have yet to see one right on the property. So that's one species we still need for the BioBlitz list. Now, the second species is the eastern musk turtle. That's actually another species that we do need to see on the property. Now, you can just assume they're there because the habitat in the area, they're all over those small lakes in the Frontenac area. Midland painted turtle, we've seen many of them on the property. We even see them in the small pond right in front of the house there. Northern map turtles we've seen just on the outskirts of the property on the roads. Now they like larger lakes, so they're not, really to be on the smaller lakes and ponds within the wintergreen property, but they are all over the outsides on the larger lakes there. Now, snake species. Wintergreen is excellent for snakes. We actually did a guided herp hike last year. I'm not sure if any of you were there for that on the property. We had an incredible day. We observed, I can't remember how many species, but we did see one green snake. That's my personal favorite. We may have seen a rat snake that day. We saw some ribbon snakes. The property, again, is incredible for all herpetofauna. We were there yesterday. We got 3 rat snakes right around the parking lot there, which was a treat as always. So we have the Caze brown snake. That is a small brown species. You guys may be familiar with it. They have some black spots going down their dorsal. Those have been observed on the property. Eastern garter snake. That's very familiar. Most of you are probably familiar with them. Again, kind of a bright yellow snake, black stripes on them. They can be quite variable though. The eastern ribbon snake. Now that is the look-alike to the eastern garter. There is some differentiating features between them though. They're really common on the property, surprisingly, mostly because all the ponds on the property, they're semi-aquatic snake species. They like to hunt frogs and amphibians, which there's a surplus of there as well. Gray rat snake. So they are always a treat to see on the property. You can pretty well guarantee seeing them every time you go. They like to hang out on the outhouses and the sheds there, so it's quite easy to find them. Now that's really special because, even myself doing this for years and observing quite a few rat snakes over the years, I don't really have anywhere that I can go and guarantee to see a rat snake, but wintergreen offers such a great habitat and spot for them, where they're not bothered by any humans. Everyone there is very passive. They all respect the animals there. They see us every year. There's actually an individual that we saw yesterday and earlier in the week that we we admitted it to Sandy Pines Wildlife Center last year. It stayed there for over a month because it had abscess on its face. We released it in the fall, and it was really, really nice to see that he made it through the winter again this year. And now underneath the species, I also have their designation for protection in the province. So just to go through them quickly, the Caze brown snake, they have no protection at all. The garter snake doesn't have any protection at all. Those species are actually not assessed. So the government hasn't really looked at these species and how they're doing, and that's most likely because we can just assume they're doing quite well as they persist in developed areas and such. Now, the eastern ribbon snake, they are a special concern, so they are on that first level of protection. And the gray rat snakes in South Frontenac, in the Frontenac area, they're listed as threatened, which gives them quite a bit of protection. But there is also a population, it's called the Carolinian population in southwestern Ontario, and they are endangered and they're not doing well at all. So the next snake species over here is the eastern milk snake. So those, we always assumed they were on the property, but we never found any. Last week, we visited the property again, kind of trying to contribute to the BioBlitz as much as we can with no one being there, and we got one. So that was extremely exciting. Again, we've been going there for years and years now, and when we go, we're staying there for days at a time, just looking for reptiles and amphibians. We've never seen a milk snake. We got one in the middle of the field last week, and that was really, really exciting. So that's a new species for the list. Now, northern water snake, they are also very common on the property. And last, but definitely not least, the smooth green snake, my favorite. We haven't found any this year, which I'm pretty upset about, but I'm hoping we'll get some more before the year end. And last year during the BioBlitz, if you guys saw the promotion photo, we did quite well and we found quite a few green snakes. So we're on to lizards. Now this is really exciting. And Rena and Jess and everyone who's watching this that was there last year, you guys can attest to it. So the 5-line skink is the only lizard that we have in Ontario. They are very, very hard to find in Eastern Ontario. We put in a good effort last couple of years at Wintergreen and did not get any. Last year, up on a rock outcrop at the top, we were incredibly lucky and we got one. And our screams could be heard from all over South Frontenac, I'm sure. Now I'm going to quickly go over frogs and toads. There is almost every frog native to Ontario found at Wintergreen. We have bullfrogs there. We have toads. There's also the chorus frog, great tree frogs, green frogs, mink frogs, leopard frogs, the pickerel frog, spring peeper, and wood frog. So as I said before, there is an abundance of these species at Wintergreen. Salamanders, you know, they're not really observed too often because they're found under logs and rocks, especially in the summertime, but there is quite a few at Wintergreen as well. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 species. Mud puppies shouldn't be there. They're an aquatic species that are found in lakes and rivers. So on the property, we have blue spotted salamanders, redbacks, four toads, eastern newts as well. So they're an aquatic salamander species, and the yellow spotted salamander. And we also did an amphibian walk last year where we found quite a few of those. So if you guys give me one moment, I'm going to grab some live reptiles for you. Now these are all native species. Again, we try to focus on the native species with this project rather than exotics and stuff. You know, we want people to be passionate about the species we have right here in our own backyard. And again, if there's one thing that I want people to take away from this, it's that, you know, we have species disappearing right here in our own backyard. We can be doing stuff to save these species right here. And again, if you go on wintergreen.com, we're going to be sharing a video that I was preparing for this. It didn't quite work out for this timing, but it's going to be a video on how to herp ethically. So if you guys were on a guided hike with us this year, it's what we would have been doing, you know, showing you guys how to find these reptiles and amphibians in the wild, and how to ethically do so without disturbing their habitat. So if you have been at Wintergreen before for these presentations, you'll be familiar with this sweetheart. This is an eastern garter snake. So this is the most common species that we have in Ontario. They can be found all over the province. They get a decent size. She's not exactly fully grown yet. They can get about 3 feet, large females. Now, most of you have probably seen them around before. Again, they're usually a pretty dark snake, black, brown, with 3 yellow stripes going down their body. So they have 1 in the middle here and 2 along the sides. Now, I actually got a new animal recently, and it's a garter snake, but I'm planning to do some trick questions with folks. I'm gonna show it to you guys first really quickly. So this is your typical eastern garter snake. I mentioned before that they're really variable actually. So this is a typical one. They have stripes going down their body. Most of you have seen garter snakes like this, but they also come in many different colors and patterns. So for example, on Peely Island in extreme southern Ontario, there is a color phase of eastern garter snake. And they're completely black. Now this is captive bred. All the animals I have are captive bred. I did not collect them from the wild. Again, a lot of native species, you need permits to keep these animals because they do have protections by government. So this completely black snake that most people would think is a rat snake is actually just an eastern garter snake. So that's a little sneak peek for you guys because no one has really seen this guy yet, but it's really, really special. So this is just a color morph, just like albino. So albino means that, you know, they have no melanin in their body. these guys have an excess of melanin. So that is why he is so dark. So the next species I'm going to bring out is also a really common native, especially in South Frontenac. Now this is a northern water snake. He's actually being a little bit feisty right now. So these guys, everyone is familiar with them. It seems like everyone has a story about them swimming and coming in contact with them. And I always hear that, people are swimming and then they see a water snake chasing them down. A lot of times what that is the water snake simply just swimming by and not even really noticing you. So you can see this guy has kind of a heavy pattern on him. Some people will mistake them for milk snakes when they're young like this and they have this patterning. And then as they get older, a lot of the time they kind of lose that pattern and they darken up a little bit. So this guy's pretty young. He still has some growing to. Fast little one, yeah. The melanistic garter is very, very quick. So again, this is the northern water snake. These guys have really, really pretty ventral scales as well. And again, if we were doing this in person, I would let everyone have a chance to touch the snakes and get hands-on with them. Again, I think that's really, really important, is getting people hands-on with these animals to see that they're not the crazy beasts that everyone thinks they are. Again, these snakes are captive bred, so they're used to being handled a lot. But Jess and Rena can attest that, when we're there BioBlitzing and gently, catching snakes just for a moment to show folks how to ID them and stuff, and then releasing them, we rarely get bit. And again, you need to understand that any animal will bite. If you see a chipmunk on a tree and you go up and snatch it, it's going to bite you, and it's going to hurt a lot worse than a snake bite. So the next species that I have is really, really special. They're not found around here, but they are found in Ontario, and they're listed as endangered. All right. So this is a fox snake. Again, so this is a really, really special species of snake. And they're really cool as well because they're actually a species of rat snake. So just like how we have the gray rat snakes up at Wintergreen Studios, down in southwestern Ontario, they have fox snakes. And they're also found in the Georgian Bay area of Ontario along the coasts. So they're really, really pretty. They almost have, I would almost describe it like a leopard pattern. Usually they have a kind of orange or bronze head to them here, and a beautiful checkered belly as well. So this is usually a crowd favorite. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit here from snakes, which are reptiles, to an amphibian now. This here is a salamander. If I can find him in his mossy kingdom. I'll show you guys his little setup actually. There you go. This is your typical salamander habitat: moss, decaying leaves, logs. So we can do actually a little bit of in situ herping here. Okay, so when you're out herping, you're usually flipping rocks and logs to find these animals. If you do this though, for example, if you flip a log, nothing underneath it, you always want to put it back exactly how it was. And if there is a critter underneath it, like there is right here, you want to gently remove it. And you put the cover back exactly how you found it. Now, this little chunky guy is a Northwestern Salamander. I kind of use him as a Jefferson Salamander mimic. So the Jefferson Salamander is listed as endangered in Ontario. This guy looks almost identical to the Jefferson Salamanders. He is actually found in Canada, though, in British Columbia. These guys are from. So, as I just mentioned, that you should remove a salamander if you do find it under cover, and then you put it back. Oh, he's looking at you guys. And then you can return the salamander to let it crawl back underneath. I do want to mention that, if you're out enjoying wildlife and you see amphibians and you do want to possibly handle them momentarily or just move them out of harm's way, it is, oh, he thinks he's being fed. That's why he's walking around. You want to make sure that you don't have any bug repellents or lotions or hand sanitizers on your hands, because amphibians have very, very sensitive skin. They absorb these things very, very quickly, and it can kill them or seriously injure them. So if you have small kids that are out catching frogs and stuff, we always encourage people to, dress for the weather rather than slathering yourself with sunscreen and bug repellents and stuff like that, because again, it is harmful to these animals. And it's not always great for yourself either. That's why at Wintergreen Studios, we're always wearing buffs or just light long sleeve shirts to protect ourselves from the sun and the insects, which there are a lot of when you're out observing wildlife. So I'm going to let this little guy go. I feel bad because he thinks he's getting fed and he's not right now. So I have one more species that I can show you just to finish up all of the groups. I don't have a frog to show you, unfortunately, or a lizard, but pretty well everything else. So this is the last species that I will show you before Q&A. So everyone is familiar with this species, I would think. This is your painted turtle, a Midland painted turtle. They're the most common turtle species, just as like the garter is our most common snake species. So these guys are easily recognized by the color on their shell here. I'm not sure what you guys can see it. I don't want to drip all over. So you can see kind of the red color around the shell, the yellow striping on the face here, orange plastron. The bottom of a turtle shell is called a plastron, and the top here is called the carapace. So these guys are pretty easily identifiable. And actually, nesting season just started. I would say yesterday in this area. We saw, unfortunately, quite a few turtles that were hit on the roads, and we did see one come up to lay its eggs as well. So that, it's just a warning. You guys definitely have to watch the roads now. That season is here. Wildlife is all over the roads. Of course, don't put yourself in harm's way, but if you can safely do so, put your four-ways on, pull over, look both ways, of course, and move the turtle in the direction that it was heading. There's going to be a lot of carnage on the roads for the next couple of weeks, unfortunately. But yeah, this is a female painted turtle. And that's the last species that I have to show you guys. So I'm going to put her away, and then I think we're ready for some questions.
I'm just looking at the Q&A, and I see that we do have some questions coming in, so I will start at the top. Kenny, the first question is, what is the easiest way to tell a northern water snake from a black rat snake?
That's a really, really good question. So I'm excited to answer this one. So the number one way that I tell folks is their scales. So I might have an example here. I'm trying to think. I'll just explain it. That'll be a little bit easier. So basically, water snakes, they have really, really keeled scales. So what I mean by that is they have a ridge in the very middle of each scale. So when you feel a water snake, and actually I give people a chance to feel this when I do shows, because you can, I'll show people a water snake and show them the keeled scales, and they'll feel it, and it has a kind of a rough texture. And then, for example, it's like a smooth green snake. They have no keels in their scales, and they're extremely smooth, so they feel like rubber when you're touching them. So water snakes have heavily keeled scales. Rat snakes have very slightly keeled scales. You could consider them not really having keeled scales at all. So when you're looking at them, you can even see the difference. Like a water snake kind of looks rough. And again, it feels rough, like the texture of it actually is. Where a rat snake, they have very, very smooth scales. Now, if you go up on Google right now and you look that up, keeled scales, you will see the difference there.
Thank you, Kenny. Our next question is about extirpation. So what does extirpated mean? What does that status entail? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so the term extirpated means that the species is no longer found locally. So, like I was talking about the timber rattlesnake, they were here years ago. Again, last observation, I think I said 1941, something like that, in the Niagara Gorge. So that was the last observation. They were killed off. So they're just not found anywhere in Ontario anymore, but they're not extinct. So extinct means the species is no longer, right? You can find timber rattlesnakes south of the border, fortunately. So just not here anymore. So that's what it means, is that we don't have them here any longer.
Thank you. Next question. Should I ever be concerned snakes can absorb anything through their skin?
Sorry, was it snakes?
Yes.
No, you don't really have to worry about that with snakes as much at all. I have been asked that before. Again, you want to make sure you're not, applying any chemicals to animals at all. You always want to keep that in mind, but it's not something that you really have to worry about with snakes. Like, for example, if you're wearing sunscreen or insect repellent, I wouldn't say you have to absolutely refrain from, safely moving a snake off of a road or something like that, if it was necessary.
Great. We had a question about turtles being territorial. Are any turtles territorial? Are snapping turtles?
Yeah, they are. So if you are on Facebook at all, on Facebook pages, actually recently I've seen a few videos posted. So there's a page called the Ontario Reptile and Amphibian Atlas. So that's where all the herpers go and post their photos and videos on Facebook. There's also one called Canadian Herpetological Society. That's another great Facebook page. Again, great references on that. And you'll see videos of snapping turtles fighting. And people are always asking, are they fighting or are they mating? So, the latter of that, you can kind of tell because they be on top of one another, on the other's back when they're fighting territorially, which they do. It's a big mess of two turtles, plastron to plastron, biting and clawing at each other. So in short, yes, they are territorial. And not many species, like, again, our painted turtles and map turtles, you see them communally basking, right? But snappers, yes. Many species are not, though.
Great, thank you, Kenny. And we have time for one more question. And it's a question about the typical lifespan of snakes, specifically the gray rat snake, but snakes in general as well.
Yeah. So rat snakes, I know they sexually mature at about like 7 years of age, like 7 years, I believe. And animals in the wild don't have as long of a lifespan, but I know they can live 15 to 20 years easily, for sure. And in captivity, they can go beyond that, likely.
Super. Well, thank you, Kenny, so much for your presentation this morning. Thanks again for joining us, and happy exploring.